Hello, Mr. Hassan Diab. We are happy because you are here today, and we give us the chance to conduct an interview with you. It's nice to meet you today at ICD. I'm going to ask you few questions. First, in your opinion, what are the current five major challenges of Lebanon, and what are the solution for it?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be amongst youth, especially that the interviewers are both Lebanese right now. And I'm very proud of you that you're doing your master's degree here. Of course, the challenges in Lebanon today are different from 2 years ago, different from 5 years ago. So the priorities today are, in my personal opinion, would be number one, electing with consensus the right president of the republic. The head of state has to be in his position for the overall political system to go back to normal. And it's extremely important to have consensus in the parliament so that the president, whoever is chosen, is not envisaged as a threat to any political party or to any group of politicians in the parliament or outside the parliament. So number one, electing the president of the republic is, in my opinion, the highest priority right now. Number two, of course, what would come next would be a new cabinet. So a new prime minister has to be nominated by the parliament in accordance with the constitution, Lebanese constitution. And then hopefully whoever is the PM-elect would constitute his cabinet in a relatively short period of time. I remember when I was prime minister, it took me 33 days. Of course, it took 13 months to form the cabinet that followed. And it usually takes 8 to 11 months to form cabinets, which is unfortunate in Lebanon because it's all a waste of time. And basically, the Lebanese at the end pay the price of this system failure. So number two is to agree on a PM that would head the cabinet. Number three, to get the support of all those involved, especially parliamentarians, to allow that PM-elect to form the cabinet as soon as possible, because time is of the essence. We've lost so much time already. And I mean, at the end of the day, the parliament has to give the vote of confidence to any cabinet. So whether anybody likes it or not, the PM-elect has to coordinate, has to interact, has to collaborate with the with the parliamentary MPs, members of the parliament, in order to come up with the best cabinet. In my humble opinion, I think all cabinets from now on should be technocrat cabinets and not political cabinets. Political cabinets have failed for the past few decades. And I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm saying at the end of the day, all political cabinets have failed. Of course, no one will succeed unless there is full coordination and full collaboration between the Speaker of the House, the President of the Republic, and the Prime Minister. Whoever is in those three positions, unless there is full coordination between them, the system will not work. It's as simple as that. This is the way that the Lebanese political system is working based on the Ta'if agreement that was signed over 3 decades ago. Of course, what would come next, in my opinion, and this should be fast. So all those previous priorities should be carried out super fast, in my humble opinion. What should come next is the economic reform plan. Now, of course, when I was Prime Minister, we introduced a reform plan that was praised by the UN, the EU, the World Bank, the IMF, and we were willing to change it based on the feedback of the Parliament. But of course, this did not see the light because of parliamentary interventions, let's say, that made the whole thing fail by simply delaying the processing of this and delaying the interaction with the IMF on that plan. I can talk more about this later if you want, but the reform plan is also a very high priority because implementing it in coordination with the IMF basically means that it's not about getting 2 or 3 billion from the IMF. It's about the stamp of approval that opens the door for others to help Lebanon at the financial level. So this will open the door to address the economic problems we're facing and the financial problems. Of course, another very important priority is, and I don't know why the central bank is still taking his time to do it, is restructuring of the banking system. A country as small as Lebanon has over 63 banks. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the UK has 6-7 banks. I mean, it doesn't make sense, a small country to have that many banks. So there has to be a restructuring where you merge banks together. And I'm a strong believer that the banking system has to be strong in Lebanon because it is the part of the system that supports the economic cycle in the country. So these are some of the priorities. There are other priorities, of course, that are essential to the country. But I would say these are very important. What would come later would be, in my opinion, not to leave the electoral law until the very end like they always do. You wait until the parliamentary elections and the month or 6 months before that, they start talking about the electoral law and nothing changes and they end up with using the same law. I personally think an electoral law that is based on Lebanon as one district would mean that political parties would have to merge because they will be submitting a list for the 128 positions in the parliament across the countries for all the sects and for all the various religions. Basically, the makeup of the parliament and the way it's distributed geographically and sectarially. So the electoral law is extremely important, and I've always been for an electoral law that would allow electronic voting so that the million or more Lebanese outside Lebanon that are able to vote would be able to vote electronically. It becomes much easier for them to do so rather than travel, if you're in the States, several hours to reach whatever center and vote. So the electoral law, I think, is also a priority, in my opinion, should be dealt with as early as possible, well before it is time for the next election cycle. I'm talking at the parliament level.
All right. I'm going to the second question. Since you were Prime Minister for Lebanon in 2020, you have made many decisions. Can you just give us a simple about what is the major decisions that you have made during this period?
Yeah. So, you know that in order to get the confidence of the parliament, you have to come up with the cabinet statement, which the cabinet has to approve within 30 days. This is the constitution in Lebanon after you form the cabinet. And in our case, we did it in 21 days. In that cabinet statement, based on which we took the vote of confidence from the parliament, which is basically a contract with the parliament of what we're supposed, the roadmap of what we're supposed to do, and a contract with the people that are represented by the parliamentarians in the parliament.
Yeah.
We divided the deliverables into 3 epochs. So the first is during the first 100 days. There were 33 targets and aims, and we achieved 32. So when I went out on day 100 and said the achievements were 98%, it was based on the fact that it was 32 out of 33 targets that are in the cabinet statement, based on which we took the vote of confidence. Of course, this got misinterpreted and it got used by the adversaries, political adversaries, that the country is in dire state economically and you're saying achievement, because it was misunderstood. It is basically meaning we achieved 32 out of the 33 targets. So that was epoch 1. The second was within the first year. And again, there were many targets that we achieved, some of them because our cabinet lasted for 6 months. So we took the vote of confidence on 11 February 2020, and we resigned on 10 August 2020,
period, yeah.
Very short period. And the third epoch was within 3 years, because, you know, when you're coming up with a cabinet statement, you don't know how long you're going to stay. Is it going to be 3 months or 3 years? You know, you simply don't know. So it's just a roadmap to... we drew a map of deliverables, targets, reforms that need to be carried out, that, as I recall now, in all of the ministries were in the order of about 325. We achieved, before we resigned, about 85 or 86 of those. So 32 during the first 100 days, and then later the remaining ones. You want me to name a few? Well, I can say the National Reform Plan.
Yeah.
We did that within 6 weeks. The first ever such reform plan in the history of Lebanon. This drew the roadmap of how we can get out of the economic disaster that we're in, not because of the 3 months we were in, because of the 3 decades of mismanagement. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying this is an accumulative process that got us to where we got. The forensic audit, for the first time, okay, they've been talking about it for 5 years and 10 years, but they didn't make the decision in the cabinet. We made the decision in the cabinet. We hired the company. We asked them to start, and they started. Forensic audit, because, you know, people are saying, put them in jail. Put who in jail? We don't know who did what. The way for that is to get a company to do forensic audits. They will say where there's a mismatch in the financials, and then the judiciary is the one that follows up. You have to work within the system. Otherwise, you can't do it. We did many decisions. The X-ray machines, the decree for that also was approved. They were talking about it for years, basically at the entry points of Lebanon, in the port, in the airport. And so this reduces smuggling to a large percentage, and it provides what's estimated an additional $1 billion of income to the government from avoiding smuggling. I mean, I can't recall them all. I'm telling you about 85 reforms, but there are quite a few. One of the main reforms that international community wanted was the formation of the new electricity board, management board. So again, we had a very academic process. There were professors that were interviewing for a long time, a large number of people, and we ended up with, I don't remember, 9 or 11 people that were selected that were the top, regardless of their affiliation, if any, to political parties. We did quite a bit, and
yes,
remember, we were under
to the short period that you had.
Not only that, we were under extreme pressure. People forget that in December 2019, when I was PM-elect, there were no issues. All the disasters and crises came in 2020. On the contrary, on that date, I had the 17th of October revolution I assumed supporting me, because when I gave my speech after becoming PM-elect on 19 December in the presidential palace. I said I am adopting all the requests of the revolution, and which included a technocrat cabinet, which included selecting ministers that are non-partisan. They don't belong to any political, they're not politicians, they're all experts. A third of them are women, and none of them, if you remember, from the previous cabinet. All of these were requests of the revolution, which I insisted to be the frame of how I'm going to form the cabinet. It was not easy to implement. You know, you're talking about political parties that are not
influence that,
so hard to influence, exactly, especially from somebody like me that is, do not belong to any political party, with all due respect to all political parties. I'm independent, completely independent, and I managed to do it, and I managed to do it in 21 days. So all the disasters came later. You know, the COVID, which even the strongest economies, the United States, couldn't handle it so easily. And actually, there was an article in the Washington Post around May 2020 that talked about how badly the U.S. is handling the COVID, and that the U.S. can learn a thing or two from small countries such as Lebanon. We were doing very well at the time because people were afraid, and they were following the instructions of the cabinet. We were the first to close the airport. We were the first to close schools, common areas, gardens, areas where people meet. And that allowed us to reach zero number of cases at some point. I think it was May or April or May of 2020. But then later it got politicized, like it was politicized in many countries in the world. And they did exactly the opposite. Many people, and then the numbers started increasing. But we were prudent and careful to make sure that we get the vaccines early on, which we did, and which allowed us to vaccinate about 70% of the population. And that's why we're here today. I mean, the number of casualties were minimal compared to other countries. So it was a very tough, and even the 69 MPs that made me PM-elect, of course, I had nothing to do with them. I did not coordinate with any political party. It was just a phase where it was required to have somebody that is independent and that is apolitical, that is a technocrat. This was what was being called by the revolution. And I happened to be the one. I mean, it could have been anyone else. There are many great people that are also technocrats and independents in Lebanon that can do a great job. But I think from the very first day that we started fearlessly talk about fighting corruption and introducing anti-corruption decrees and laws, people started to turn more and more against us. Forensic audit, many people didn't want that either. So I personally think that cabinet was a lost opportunity for the Lebanese. We were there not to become politicians. We were there not to become parliamentarians. And I said that in my speech in the parliament during the vote of confidence. We were there to serve our countries, finish and go back home. That's exactly the words I used in the parliament. We did not want to challenge anybody. We did not want to fight politically with anybody. But unfortunately, because we wanted to fight corruption seriously, and because we were introducing decrees, regulations, draft laws that fight corruption, I think that upset a lot of people, and they turned against us. They wanted us out very quickly. Of course, the vertical division in the parliament didn't help. So all of these problems came at the same time during 2020.
Yeah, I would like to thank you. We are moving for my friend. He also want to ask you some few questions, if you don't mind.
With pleasure.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you again for being with us today. My question to you is, as a senior politician, what is your advice for generations of future leaders, especially the younger generation?
Well, that's easy for me. I mean, I'm I'm a politician, but my 35-year career has been mainly an academician. I've spent 31 out of 35 years as an academic. Of course, I went through the whole process. I was a professor, I was a chairman of a department, I was dean of the School of Engineering, I was vice president of a university, president of a university, I was minister for higher education. Of course, all of this is repeating, but anti-clockwise now. Anyway, my advice to new generation is that at the core of all our problems and the solutions to these problems is education. Empower yourself with education. Make sure that you get the best possible education you can. Do not stop at the bachelor level. I know that people will say, if I take a PhD, it means I'm going to be a professor. No, you don't have to be a professor. You can be a researcher. You can work in the corporate sector. You can work in companies. Yes, you can be a professor as well. In research institutions, you can do many things. But my personal opinion is that education is essential for our new generation. They have to have all the needed skills to become leaders, what I mentioned in my presentation today. And in order to do that, you have to have strong emotional intelligence attributes. You have to have a strong educational background, especially the undergraduate program, because that's where you acquire a lot of the social skills and a lot of the soft skills that are needed for success in the future. Success not only in the workplace, success in your family, in your neighborhood, in your city, in your country. And I don't want to repeat what I said in my presentation, but a good, strong undergraduate education. Don't stop there. You go to the master's and PhD, and you don't stop there. I mean, as a professor and as a vice president at AUB, after 25 years of being a professor, I went to Harvard and I did an executive education program on negotiations. Although I have been signing and negotiating contracts by then for 15 years, education is key. It is key. Keep educating yourself, and that will allow you to improve in your workplace, but also as a human being in the quality of life and the type of life that you would lead. Education, I think, is my advice. Make sure that you get good education.
Thank you for that. One more question. We all are aware of the complex political fabric in Lebanon and multiple factors that are involved in the politics and government of the country. And your tenure as Prime Minister, in my opinion, was one of the most challenging, given the unprecedented time that Lebanon has been going through and still going through up to now. In your opinion and in your experience with dealing firsthand with these complexities, do you think we can take advantage of them in order to advance the country in general, or do you regard them as hurdles we must overcome first in order to establish a good economy, good policy, so on and so forth?
Well, my specialization in computer engineering is parallel processing. So I'm going to answer by saying they have to come in parallel. You can't wait. You can't do it sequentially. Otherwise, you will not reach in 100 years where you want to reach. So you have to work on a technocrat cabinet. At the same time, you have to work on a president that has the largest possible consensus in the parliament. Otherwise, it won't work. And you also need to work on a electoral law for the parliament that is encapsulating that will allow you to elect for a program rather than for people. So when you have 128, a list of 128, and you have several lists to choose from, you're no longer looking at the names as much as you're looking at the program of this list. What do they want to do in education? What do they want to do with the economy, with the finance, and so on? So having one district, they all say they are for one district, but when it comes to voting, like many things, they don't do it in the parliament. So having one district would reduce the political interference of big political parties, because they can influence a certain area, but they cannot influence the whole of Lebanon. I mean, they can, but the influence becomes much less. And then at the end of the day, you are electing, every Lebanese is electing the whole parliament, you know. But all of these have to be driven by the Lebanese. I mean, if they don't go on the streets and request that, I was surprised that the Lebanese didn't do that several months before the previous, the past parliamentary elections, when they were talking about the parliamentary law. Because if they want change, that's the way to change, you know. I mean, the change this time was 13 parliamentarians, and we know that some of them belong one way or the other to other political parties. So this is less than 10% change. They could have made a 50% change had it been a single district. We all know right now the 15 districts in the electoral law is cut and paste to suit different leaders in different... I mean, this is not hidden. Everybody knows it.
Sure.
So the Lebanese are good people. They are people. They are fighters. They are people that want the country to improve. But this is not going to happen if they keep reproducing the same political layers. I mean. It doesn't make sense that to say for the Lebanese citizen to say that I have no electricity and then re-elect the same political layer who has not provided you electricity for 30 years. It doesn't make sense, you know. So I think the media in Lebanon is very much directed. And it is misleading. This is why, this is the point I mentioned in one of my questions today in one of the lectures, that misinformation and fake news is a huge problem, not just in Lebanon, in many other countries that are causing
propaganda. You mean
propaganda, and people, you know, even my wife, when she hears something, says. Can that be possible? I tell her, do not believe the news. You know, in my personal experience, 80% of what you hear is inaccurate, or incorrect, or deflected, or so. This is why analysis and synthesis are essential, and this you acquire in the soft skills during your undergraduate education. When you hear something, when you see something, analyze it. Don't just take it at face value. You have to analyze everything that you hear and you see. Because unfortunately, most of what you hear and you see are untrue.
Thank you for your time. It was an honor and privilege to have you here with us. And I hope there's a light at the end of this dark tunnel.
I want to tell you something, because you're youth, that the reason why I accepted to be Prime Minister-elect on 19 December 2019 was for the youth. I wanted the youth to have an opportunity to stay in the country. I wanted the youth that are outside to come back to the country, including my children who are now in the States. I had vested interest in doing that. But what came in 2020, the multiple crises at the global level, at the regional level, and at the national level, was unprecedented. And what we faced in 6 months, nobody faced in 30 years.
True. Very true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
All the best.
All the best.